Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Mission Matters. My name is Adam Torres, and if you'd like to apply to be a guest in the show, just head on over to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to apply. All right, so today is a very special episode. We're bringing Cameron Clark onto the line. He's a board advisor and also an aerospace engineer. Cameron, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you very much. And you got my name correct.
Come
Kudos.
on, man. I got to get it right. That's what I do. It's my job. So I'm excited to talk about a whole lot today. We're going to get into some of your work as a board advisor. And one of the reasons I was excited to have you on this show today was, we've had quite a few conversations in the past. And I understand some of the things you're doing on boards, of course, but also I thought about it like, what a great idea to bring you on the show to hopefully educate our viewers and myself a little bit more about what it entails to be a great board member. Like, why even have a board? Like, what are some of the reasons why businesses do this? And really just give us some of that education piece. So we got a lot to cover today, but we'll start this interview the way that we start them all, with what we like to call our Mission Matters Minute. So Cameron, at Mission Matters, our aim and our goal is to amplify stories for entrepreneurs, executives, and experts. That's what we do. Cameron, what mission matters to you?
Well, before I get into that, Adam, first, thank you very much for having me on the show. As far as what mission matters to me, my mission is to help companies who are mission driven to grow and strive. And I do that by providing strategic advice and connections and, bringing together good people who also want to see that mission strive and grow.
Yeah, it's great. So great to have you on. And I think maybe just to get this kicked off, before we start talking about boards, board work, what that looks like, let's go further back into your background. Aerospace engineer. I mean, tell me more about that and how you entered that field.
Well, it's simple. Most people will tell you, I think maybe the people of the boomer generation, I'm Gen X, by the way, they will tell you that they were inspired by Star Wars or Star Trek. And, I had exposure to those shows and movies in my household as well, but we were not, Trekkies or anything like that.
I won't hold it against you. It's okay. It's okay. Nobody's perfect. Go ahead.
I know I'm getting a lot of rocks thrown at me right now. But hey, it is what it is. And so for me, the inspiration came from, my family, they took a vacation typically once a year. And that meant we go on the plane once a year. Normally it wasn't anything extravagant. Occasionally it was. But in fact, the point is we were on a plane. And every time we were on the plane, we, end up in coach, and I'd be over the wing. And I would just stare out the window for the whole ride if I wasn't asleep. And I will watch the ailerons flap up and down, and I would just be fascinated by that. How could something so large with so many people on it lift off like a bird?
Wow.
I always wanted to know how that worked. And so that inspired me to get into engineering. And then once I learned about the different types of engineering, I settled on aerospace engineering because obviously aerospace engineers design planes. So that's what got me into it. I landed
so hold on. So what I'm hearing though is you're lucky you got the window seat too. If you didn't have the window seat, no offense, but good job on the parents. Come on, go ahead.
Yeah. I think I pretty much demanded the window seat, or maybe they just didn't want the window seat. As an adult, you don't want to sit by the window; you want the aisle, right? But yeah, kudos to my parents for doing that.
Man, that's a great story. I didn't know that one. That's great. So looking at your career as an aerospace engineer, so obviously you have your career, you're working as an aerospace engineer, and at some point in your career, you think about, or when does it come under your radar, the concept and the thought process of like board advisory work, and maybe that's something you want to start dabbling in or even exploring. Like, how does that connection happen?
Yeah, so kind of what I mentioned in my mission that matters to me, right? I advise board companies or organizations at a strategic level. I've always been interested in how things get done and the why. All right, and
Yeah.
you have to have a big picture mindset to do that. And that's kind of why I got into aerospace engineering, right? Obviously you need to know the finer details of how things work.
Hmm.
But as you learn more and peel those layers back, you want to know, all right, why are we building these things? Why are
Yeah.
organizations or governments procuring these large systems, right? So you start to understand or start to think about the why. Why am I doing this job first, and then
Hmm.
how does this job impact the overall system, and then why is this overall system being purchased, and what is
Mm.
the role of this overall system with in the ecosystem or environment
Yeah.
of the other systems, etc. So I kind of extrapolated that line of thinking to my board work, and to help the CEOs or entrepreneurs who are very head down, focused, trying to do the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. Sometimes
Hmm.
5 or 10 things at once. Stay focused on the bigger picture, and make sure that they tie all the activities that they're doing to the vision or the mission that they've laid out. So
Mm.
that's what does it for me.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, and I kind of want to step back a bit here, and I don't want to make some assumptions. So one of the assumptions is like that everybody listening maybe understands how what's the purpose of even having a board that advises
Sure.
a company. Maybe let's start kind of basic, and from your viewpoint, like why is it
Mhm.
important for companies to even have boards?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it goes back to what I was kind of just saying. So, obviously, every company has a leadership team, and that
Hmm.
leadership team is focused on operations. To keep it simple, right? Obviously, you have other
Yeah.
functions, um, but they need to ensure that not only are they delivering on the promises they've made to their stakeholders.
Hmm.
Sometimes those stakeholders are investors or governments or whomever have your customers,
Hmm.
but they are playing along with the rules of the game, if you will. And
Hmm.
everyone operates to rules or laws or policies that are set by governments. And the other, so you got to make sure that those things are being taken care of.
Hmm.
I mentioned some of the other functions. One of the bigger functions is finance. There's a lot of um, um, regulations, as I'm sure you know, being a former
Hmm.
accountant, that you have to adhere to, and that those things really matter to investors, whom are like your major stakeholders. If you're in a public company or
Hmm.
you aspire to go public, you have to make sure all of that is in alignment. And so
Hmm.
that plays in the lines of governance. And then there's other things like environmental and social, and those things matter to investors as well, because
Hmm.
they uh, they matter to the bottom line of the company.
Hmm.
Um, Aside from that, right, all companies need to grow. They don't just want to grow; they need to
Yeah.
grow, because if you're not growing, you're likely on the decline, right?
Hmm.
And so that obviously matters to investors, because investors put their money in the company to grow, and the company grows, the investors' profits grow
Hmm.
as well. So you need someone who is able to keep in mind investors' wants and needs and wishes, and be able to parlay what's happening in the company to investor speak, if you will. So those are some of the things that people need boards. But if you're just
Yeah,
starting out, right, some of those things are a little far away,
for
and
sure.
you really just want to focus on meeting expectations and delivering on your promises, so that you can, get down the runway, if you will.
Yeah. What are some character, and obviously understanding every company is going to be different, and different sizes of companies, and a bunch of different variables, but just characteristics of boards or board members or the mix, like again, understanding no two companies are going to be the same. Like, what are some good characteristics you feel you've either seen or find in good boards, and
Yeah.
what they're made up of?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one that I think is hotly debated.
Hmm.
So if you think back to the financial crisis, 2008, 2009.
I try
Um,
not to very often, but I'll do it for you, Cameron. I'll just throwing that out there. That's when I started my career in finance back in 2007. So I remember well. Go ahead, please.
okay. Sorry. I'll try to keep that brief, this part brief. But
No, no, no. Give it to us, man.
all right, millennials investment banks, right? Your
Hmm.
Citibanks, your Wells Fargo, the ones that collapsed. Even if you want to go back a little further, Enron, they
Yeah.
had large boards. All right, you're talking about 11 plus people.
Hmm.
Um, and the problem, like, have you ever tried to plan a trip with a bunch of friends and you get the group text going and you got 10 people in there and it's like, all right, we're all going to Cabo.
Man, doing
And
that right
somebody's
now.
like,
Go ahead.
right, most people are like, yay. And then, probably everybody's like, yay. And then a week goes by and it's like, I don't know if I'm going. And then someone else is like, well, I don't want to go to Cabo. Right. And, you have a hard time hurting all of those cats. Right. That's the
Yeah.
problem with large boards. And that's the problem with a lot of those firms back in those times. And some of
Hmm.
that exists now. So first, you want to talk about structure. You want
Hmm.
to keep your boards to a manageable size. Seven
Hmm.
to 10 people. 10 people is probably still too large
Hmm.
because even then you're going to have committees. Um, then you want to make sure that you have the right people bringing the right expertise.
Hmm.
You want to make sure that you have a strong board chair
Hmm.
who's in tune with the CEO and how the company works. And you want people who also know how the company works, not just from you know um, a sideline perspective, but people have been
Hmm.
in that industry, um, or not necessarily that company or similar companies, but the industry. So they
Yeah.
know how it works. They know what causes the ups and downs and who the dependencies are, where
Hmm.
the pitfalls are, the regulations, etc. And then you want somebody who can dive deep into some of the functional roles. Um,
Mm.
and then, so that's a bit on structure, but all things human, right? There's social and political aspects to it as well. So you need to
Hmm.
have a board that has good rapport and trust.
Yeah.
So the organization of that board, the
Hmm.
structure of it plays into that because, like, again, if
Hmm.
you have too many people, it's gonna be hard to have rapport and
Yeah.
trust. Um, so if you have a strong board chair who's you know I don't want to say charismatic because that can be dangerous, but is able to play well with others and get
Yeah.
people to cooperate and build that trust, as well as building that trust with the management team of the company, the CEO. And that I don't want to leave the him or her, CEO out of the equation because that
Hmm.
person is also very important. Um, because you need to have that person trusting the board as well. You don't want them
Hmm.
hoarding information from the board or just disengaging because they find board activities like investor relations to be boring. They just want to play in the
Hmm.
sandbox, if you will. So again, so you have the structure / organization, trust and rapport, a strong board
Hmm.
chair. Um, those are some of the elements that make for a good board.
Mm. Why do you choose? You talked about it a little bit, but I want you to go further. So, for example, mentality matters. I happen to know when I
Mhm.
was doing my research in this that you like that's one of the boards you sit on, and that's one that I found. Why do you choose to sit on boards and even work with companies like Mentality Matters? Like why?
Well, mentality matters. Going back to the mission, right?
Hmm.
I look to help out companies and organizations that are mission driven, and if that
Mm.
mission aligns with my values, and I can see myself going along with it, then I want to be a
Hmm.
part of that, and I want to make sure that I do what I can,
Yeah.
to help that organization be successful. So, mentality matters. Is mission is to support the mental health and wellness of veterans, right?
Mm.
And this is uh, a a mission that's kind of near and dear to my heart. I come from a military family.
Mm.
The industry that I work in is obviously defense driven.
Yeah.
I support the men and women of the military in everything that I do, either from the systems that I design or from helping them acquire the systems that I designed in
Mm.
previous lives. So I've become ingrained in that community, and I've had friends who were veterans that have suffered from mental illness.
Mm.
So it just seemed like a great fit for me
Yeah.
to be on board with that. It really makes sense. I couldn't see myself not being a part of it.
Hmm. How does a and I like to kind of talk about the function of just aerospace engineer, and now you combine that with an organization like Mentality Matters. What are some, and I don't know if this is exactly a fair question, but I'm interested in it, Cameron.
Okay.
Like, what are some of the things that like a unique perspective of an aerospace engineer or someone with your background can bring to a company? Like, it doesn't have to be Mentality Matters. It can be if you want to use
Right.
that as a case, but just in general, like, because I think that
Yeah.
diversity of like skill set is, I just find it highly interesting.
That's a good question, and I think people often wonder how the two align like that. So
Yeah.
I think it's very, very simple, right? So I'm a system engineer. I'm also a chief engineer. But as a system engineer, you are tasked with understanding the entire system. How
Mm.
all the parts need to come together. You're not necessarily doing all the work that it takes to
Hmm.
bring the system together, but you have to have a better, fair understanding of it so that you can talk to those who are focused on the different parts and understand what
Hmm.
they need to do and how they need to work with the other teams. So it's that very big picture understanding.
Mm.
Um, and as a chief engineer, you're not just leading the team that is doing all the engineering work, right? You're working with these
Hmm.
other stakeholders. You're working with your management, you're working with their management, you're working with customers, um,
Yeah.
and to convey to them what's happening. Are things
Hmm.
going well, or are they not, and why?
Yeah.
And how are we going to resolve these issues? So that sort of thinking lends itself very well to organizations like Mentality Matters or
Mm.
any company, really, because you're the type of person that wants to dig in and understand how things work,
Yeah.
and in understanding how things work, you can see shortfalls or
Hmm.
gaps and work to bring in the resources, whether that's people or funds or technology, to
Mm.
close those gaps.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's and I can just think about like the difference of when we move from when I move from finance to then mission matters, and when I
Mm,
think about my transition into media, when I think about the concept of how many people, we didn't have a formalized board, but I think about how many people like in my sphere that helped me. And when I think about like had we started going down that advisory route sooner, like possibly how much even further
mm,
along we could have been by some of those expertise, because it's not a, I mean, it's not quite as casual of a relationship. So when you create a board and when you have a board that's really advising, like it's a different relationship, and I think there's a different level of obviously accountability on both sides, right? So it's
mhm,
not it's not quite as casual, which I think can help. And when I think about like Mentality Matters, and I know a little bit about the vision that Richie, the founder over there, has kind of shared with me as well. I'm like, wow, like it's an interesting way to go about things, and it just makes sense to me. Like, so when I think about aerospace engineer working
mm.
with Mentality Matters or working with any other company that you happen to be serving the board, it's like they get to benefit from all your education, man. Your education, your experiences, the large company, which we don't have to say the name, but just say you work for a big company, right? You're in the defense in that industry. You're in a big company, and you just have insight. So I find it interesting. I think it's amazing. Um,
Thank you. Thank you. You know, going back to give another example
mhm.
of what makes a good board, or an example of a good board, I think of UPS, right?
Mm.
Um, that's an example. They don't have a huge team, but they've been together for a long time,
Mm.
and they hold open debates, right?
Yeah.
I think the one of the famous debates they had was, all right, should we change the color of UPS, which is the famous brown? Everyone knows that, right?
Yes.
It was very public, and they did it without, yeah, I don't want to say they did it without name calling, but no one got thrown under the UPS truck when they did that, right? But it turned out well. They kept it, and the company's doing very well. They've been able to expand their logistics
Mm,
operations throughout the world. And I don't think UPS would have been able to make the pivots they have made without that
mhm.
board.
It's great. Well, Cameron, this has been a lot of fun having you on the show, catching up, learning more about your work, the companies you're working with, and organizations. I just have to ask, what's next? I mean, what's next for you? What's next for the future of your work?
Well, I'm very focused on Mentality Matters, making sure that we continue to raise funds to support our efforts to
Mhm,
to provide services to veterans who may be suffering from mental illness. We
mhm,
have um, a gathering coming up later this year that
mhm.
I'll let Richie share about. And also, there's also going to be a big announcement coming, so hopefully everyone stays tuned for that.
Yeah. Awesome. And if people want to follow up and to continue to follow your journey, whether it's on social media or otherwise, how do they do that?
They can follow me on LinkedIn.
Mhm,
You can find me by my name. It's Cameron Clark. Or
mhm.
on Instagram, it's lift off with Cam. There's underscores there, lift underscore off underscore Cam.
Awesome. And for everybody watching or listening to this, just so you know, we'll put the links to the LinkedIn profile and all that good stuff in the show notes. And speaking of the audience, if this is your first time with Mission Matters and you haven't done it yet, hit that subscribe or follow button. This is a daily show. Each and every day, we're bringing you new content, new episodes, and new entrepreneurs to hopefully and executives to hopefully inspire you along the way in your journey as well. So again, hit that subscribe or follow button. And Cam, again, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, Adam. This was fun.